So this is Unit 2, Research Methods. Uh, so generally, when you get a master's in sociology, one thing that you have to do is write a 60 to 100 page paper on a topic and original research of your choice. And what I did is interview or aging Filipino Americans. This is a picture of my parents. And what I had been noticing with them and with other older Filipino Americans that I knew was that instead of living with children as they got older, as Filipinos and Asians often do, they ended up living on their own. So my parents, they moved to Las Vegas to a active adult community, and I noticed that there are many other Filipinos that live there too. So my question was prompted by seeing this trend and thinking about, why was this happening? We have a cultural pattern from before and seeing a shift. So that was kind of my question. And what I did was interview different interview their friends, interview them to see what was happening. And what I found was that they just essentially had changes in their cultural attitudes and their children as well. So they're living in an ethnic community, the retirement community, instead of with family. So how do I know what I know? And how does any researcher know that the answer to their question is right? Short answer is research methods. I can't just use a single anecdote, or even just a handful of anecdotes about my parents and their friends. I actually have to go through research methods, which is a systematic approach that scientists use to study social phenomena. So it isn't just I'm talking to my parents, I'm talking to their friends, but doing it in a very systematic way and talking to many people, much larger than just people that I know. So there's several approaches to research. Primarily, there's qualitative and quantitative research, which we'll be talking about. The question is, how do you choose what sort of method that you're going to go with? Is it your personal preference? Oh, I just like talking to people, I like interviewing people, or I rather deal with numbers and surveys? Short answer is no. The way you choose what method you use is data driven. That is to say, what is your research question and what sort of data do you need to actually answer it? So, for instance, if you're interested in the question of does playing video games in childhood lead to crime and violence, there are particular sorts of data that you might want to look at. For instance, statistical data on, rate of playing violent video games during childhood and how it correlates to crime or violence later on in life. If you're interested in how video game players communicate strategies in a multiplayer game, so I can't even if you're playing online with people, in a different place, how do you communicate the strategies you're going to use if you're playing some sort of war game, for instance? That you wouldn't probably use surveys because you wouldn't be able to hear or analyze the sorts of communication that they have. So maybe in that sense, you would either want to do interviews or actually observe while people are playing the game in real time. So that's just pointing out the way that you need to consider what kind of question you have and what kind of approach would best give you the data that you need to answer that question. So when you're conducting research, you enter an ongoing process called the research cycle. First, you want to consider what you're actually interested in if you want to do research. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the expression, it's not what you know, but who you know. So then let's just start with that. I want to do research about that. Is it actually true or is it not? So One of the things that you want to ask yourself after that is there an existing theory that sort of explains what you're interested in? So, actually, yes, in sociology, there is a concept called social capital, which refers to the different sorts of information and connections that you get from people that you know. So, if it's not what you know, it's who you know. That really tries to explain that. So, there's kind of two main approaches that you would go and start your research. The first is deductive. So, if you do have a theory, in this case we do, you start with a theory, you create and test your hypotheses, and then you respond to the theory. So you start with this idea of, okay, if you know many people, then you probably have a better chance of getting a job. The more people you know, the higher chance you have to get a job. That would be the hypothesis. Then you test that and see what emerges from that, and then based on that, you can then respond to the theory. Is it completely true, or do you need to adjust it in some way? Inductive research, on the other hand, starts with observations, and then you develop your theory. So, if the question you have is how do people develop social capital in virtual spaces, which is a new sort of context, right? You might want to start with different observations instead of actual just numerical counts of how many people you are connected with in real life, right? And then see how people are actually virtually connected. Is it through Facebook? Is it through more professional networks like LinkedIn? Is it through Twitter? And if there are different sorts of information they get from those different things. And then because there's no theory that already exists, then from that you actually develop theory about virtual social capital, if you will. So in the research cycle, it is a circle, and there is no single starting point, because oftentimes you will go through the cycle more than one time in the process of doing a single research project. You'll be having if you're deductive and you start with a theory and develop hypotheses, and then you do observations and analyze, you might find yourself observing things that prompt new theoretical questions. So then you might develop more hypotheses, and so on and so forth. So on the flip side, if you're doing inductive research, you'll be starting with empirical observations, analyzing, and then developing theory or finding theory that you did not know would be relevant. So you could start pretty much anywhere in this cycle, and you can go through the cycle multiple times during the course of research. So ultimately, the goal, I think, for social research is to tell a story about something. Eliminate other possibilities and just try to find the most truthful tale about why something happens, why social phenomena occurs.